It's information just like you would get if you went out to Google and typed something in, for the most part. I mean, a lot of it has been vetted because it is my profession, right? So there's a wealth of information out there that we've worked through to kind of compile the best recommendations into what we're about to discuss. But ultimately, it's what you use the information for that really makes a difference. So information without action is really nothing. So this is me, I'm Jenna Richardson. I am a certified integrative health coach and a functional diagnostic nutritionist. And I have here with me my colleague, my business partner, and he's also my dad. This is Dr. Vinny. So he is the medical doctor at our practice here in Lawrenceville, Princeton Integrative Health. And so we'll talk a little bit about what brought us here today, but basically my story is that I lived my life significantly overweight. I was anywhere from 15 to 50 pounds overweight, majority of my first 3 decades. And it wasn't until I really started to think about what I was putting into my body and how I was living my life that I was able to truly kind of gain control of that and make some significant changes. I also struggled with things like asthma and allergies and anxiety and acne. Little did I know at the time, we grew up, I'm Italian predominantly, so we grew up on pizza and pasta and bread and all the things that at the time we thought were good. It was the time of the high carb era, low fat craze. So also I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so it was Snackwell cookies and Diet Coke. Just didn't realize that what I was putting into my body was creating a lot of the symptoms that I was struggling with. In my 30s, I had my first child, and he had a host of issues as well. One which actually could have been very problematic because we were prescribed a medication for him, which thank goodness the pharmacist at the time called me aside and said this could cause respiratory failure in a child of his age and he could die. So my background up until that point was in international business and management consulting, but at that point I was like, you know what, I'm not pursuing my purpose and my passion, and I felt this deep calling to really kind of go back and pursue an education around nutrition and health and wellness, and so that brought me here today. And I jokingly say that I brought my dad kicking and screaming from the dark side of conventional medicine over to what we call integrative health and functional medicine. So we practice kind of at the intersection of conventional medicine and functional medicine is really driving at the root cause of disease and dysfunction and leveraging the body's innate intelligence in many cases to live well. So we have a few personal and practice policies. So we don't believe there are any get healthy overnight schemes regardless of what the internet or late night television might tell you. We believe the body is innately intelligent and is meant to fix itself. A lot of times it just involves removing the noise, right? A lot of the stuff we have going on in our lives and our environment and the things we're putting in our body create a lot of noise so that we're not able to be in tune with what we really need. Disease doesn't occur in isolation, so even though the conventional medical model treats it that way, disease is pretty pervasive throughout our bodies. We believe that inflammation is the predominant cause for all disease and dysfunction, so we're going to talk about that here tonight, and that stress is the underlying cause of inflammation. We believe that many people who embark on a health journey fail, and that's just because of a couple of key reasons. One being there's just so much information out there. So there's so much to sort through, right? Any small ailment you have, you can go right online, type into Dr. Google, and it provides thousands of results. And navigating that is challenging. It's even challenging when it's something that you do for your profession. So many different systems, which one works for me? We practice a philosophy called bioindividuality, which means that each and every person is a unique biochemical machine. So what works for me may not work for you, right? We're all kind of made up of different genetics, come from different cultural backgrounds. Our ancestors came from different geographic regions and climates, so the way that our bodies have evolved are different in each and every case. And does my practitioner truly understand the problem, or are they just putting me in a box? So as we all know, most medical professionals nowadays get paid by these large insurance companies, most of which have to actually code you, right? It's called an ICD-10 code. So in order for them to get paid for their services that they're providing you, they need to put you in a box, literally. And recent statistic I heard is that 38% of all of these diagnostic codes are incorrect. So we don't diagnose or treat disease. We work with our patients to co-create health. As we talked about, stress is the root cause of all disease and dysfunction. This is actually a series of paintings that we have hanging on the wall in the office. I don't know how well you can see it, but basically up here we have diseases, obesity, energy dysfunction, autoimmune disease, a whole bunch of things, cancer, diabetes. Down here we have the roots, right? And in the middle are stress and inflammation. So we actually drive at the root cause. So we're looking for these guys so that we can treat at the root level and not get up into the branches. We believe that virtually all disease starts in the gut, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and then that the patient determines the health outcome and not the practitioner. And so what that really means is that we empower our patients to regain control of their life and of their health. So just a little bit of information in terms of staying connected. We have a Facebook page, it's Princeton Integrative Health. We have a Facebook community, Princeton Integrative Health Community, so that's kind of a closed group of like-minded, health-minded folks who have come together to share information, tips, tricks, recipes, things like that. We're on Instagram, and then our website is princetonih.com. You can go there and sign up for our newsletter. So let's talk a little bit about inflammation. That's what we're here for, right? So inflammation is the body's natural healing process. So if you were to stub your toe, break your arm, cut your finger, your body would produce an inflammatory response. And this inflammatory response is the body's natural healing mechanism, right? So if I'm injured, that's what happens. My immune system kicks into gear, produces this inflammation. It helps to heal, and it helps to protect me from things like pathogens. That's called acute inflammation. So we want that. We don't ever not want our bodies to be producing that type of a response. The problem really lies in what we call chronic inflammation. So chronic inflammation is ongoing, long-term, underlying kind of low-level inflammation that can be caused by a bunch of different things, some of which we may not even be aware. And it's this long-term process and this kind of festering of inflammation in our bodies and in our systems that ultimately lead to things like diabetes and cancer and depression, cardiovascular disease, and there are a bunch of kind of a whole host of factors that influence the production of that chronic inflammation. We're going to talk about what some of those things are. And more recently, a lot of science is proving that Alzheimer's disease and cognitive decline is actually a result of inflammation that's produced by both the immune system and the nervous system and presenting in the brain. So I don't know if you all have heard of, so diabetes is an inflammatory condition, type 2 diabetes. They're calling Alzheimer's disease type 3 because of the inflammation, the underlying chronic inflammation that results in that disease, presentation of that disease. So let's talk about the 7 factors that cause inflammation. We're going to talk about diet, of course, right? So what foods should we be eating? What shouldn't we be eating? We're going to talk about glucose and insulin regulation, so blood sugar balance. We're going to talk about leaky gut. Have people heard of the term leaky gut? No? Yes?
Heard of it.
Okay, good. So we'll talk about what that is. Chronic stress, everyone's got it. Unfortunately, the world in which we live in, it's kind of hard to avoid. We look at both what we call external stressors and internal or hidden stressors, so we'll talk about what those things are. Poor sleep habits. I don't know about you all, but I struggle with this almost every night. I have 2 young kids and a geriatric dog, so I was saying to my husband this morning, I think I woke up 6 or 7 times last night, so I don't know anyone that I talk to who says I get great sleep. Great sleep. Environmental toxins, again, something unfortunately we're all exposed to on a regular basis, and then chronic infections. So everything we eat breaks down into sugar. So our body and our metabolism is driven based upon this. So when I say metabolism, what comes to mind? Anyone? If I talk about your metabolism, what do you think about? Yeah,
No.
great.
The speed at which you're gathering energy from the food.
Good, educated people. So when I ask a group of non-educated people in this area, they say how quickly I gain or lose weight. That's what people think. I have a fast metabolism, I have a slow metabolism. But metabolism is actually the way that your cells produce energy. And our cells produce energy based upon the food that we eat. The food that goes into our body breaks down into glucose. Our pancreas releases insulin, and that insulin helps to drive the glucose into the cell. From there, our mitochondria produce energy. What happens a lot of the time is that based upon the foods that we're eating, it's causing this graph on the right-hand side. So we really want our bodies to remain in balance. We want to eat something, have the insulin raise, so we can go through that process of pushing the glucose into the cell and the energy production. What we don't want, and what we see a lot of the time based on the diet that a lot of people are consuming, is something that looks like this. And this is not only really a challenge in terms of producing energy and maintaining energy, but it also causes a lot of stress on the body and on the system. So this is really optimal blood sugar balance on the left-hand side. Again, you want to maintain that throughout the day. So what does that look like? It looks like eating kind of frequently throughout the day, not eating huge meals, eating things that are low glycemic, and we'll talk about what those things look like. But trying to eliminate that stress-producing process. So when you have a curve that looks like this and your body's doing this all day, it causes a lot of stress. Stress causes inflammation, producing a lot of cortisol in the system, and ultimately that drives chronic inflammation. Healthy gut versus leaky gut. So when our bodies are under chronic stress and when we have a lot of things going on in our system, it affects our gastrointestinal tract. Our gastrointestinal tract is literally only a single cell thick. So when you think about, the fact that we're digesting food, it's going down into our intestines. In our small intestines, the food's absorbed into our bloodstream, delivered to our cell. Our large intestines, it's prepared for excretion. But that whole, what separates that system from the rest of our body is literally a single cell thick. So it's very, very easy for that to become compromised. And when it becomes compromised, it can create a whole host of issues in our system, predominantly because we're supposed to be absorbing food through the cell, intracellular. But what happens is when our cell walls start to break down, food, microbes, toxins, all of these things can seep through the cells and immediately affect our immune system, because about 80% of our immune system lies immediately adjacent to our gut lining. And then so it affects our immune system, causes an inflammatory response, then enters our bloodstream. And once those things are in our bloodstream, they're now circulating through our body. So your body goes, oh my goodness, what's in my blood? Why is this happening? And what does it do? It attacks the foreign invaders, causes inflammation, and leads to a lot of the chronic conditions. So functional medicine really believes in this concept of leaky gut. We believe 99% of people who present with autoimmune conditions, of which there's 100 plus at this point in time, so things like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus and psoriasis and ulcerative colitis, a whole bunch of things, are a result of this process occurring within a person's system. Does that make sense?
I have a question.
Yes.
Can it cause an infection in your intestines?
Sure.
Okay, because I had that like a few months back. It was the worst pain ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the chest, I had to take antibiotics, but yeah, I thought I was going to die.
And did that help?
Yeah, at the hospital, yeah. I felt like I got like shot or something burst inside me. I was just wondering what it came from. I kind of like just changed the way I eat and started exercising and stuff.
And that's helped.
I used to weigh like 273 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
But
amazing.
yeah, it was the worst pain ever. I thought it was like gas or something, but they said I had an infection inside of my intestines, but they couldn't explain to me how I got it.
Yeah, I mean, that really is kind of one of the more extreme examples of leaky gut, where the bacteria have now leaked out of your intestine and gotten next to the intestine and actually created, what might be called an abscess, and they, and so, so then your body goes crazy because now there's a real threat to your system. So it's like, somebody dropped, an army landed there, that's trying to invade you, and so your body just starts sending in the troops, and they're sending in their bombs and everything.
Right. So I was just wondering how, like, no one could really explain it to me, how did you see me the antibiotics stuff, so in the hospital. Told them to take the antibiotics.
Yeah, these things just happen. These things just happen to you. It's usually a compromised intestinal barrier that leads to that.
Okay, all right. I was curious. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's
This is good.
No.
Yeah.
It's not like we have a whole crowd here that we have to worry about being formal.
All right.
Yeah.
So.
And like all of these things are things that can cause that, right? So you could have had a pathogen that contributed to that erosion and then just set off that inflammatory response. I'm glad you're feeling better.
I feel a lot better.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, like I said, I thought I was gonna die that night, you know, I'm sitting there like writing out the will, you know, like calling my mom, like, I love you, Mom. Just talk to me, you know? Yeah, but, yeah, I'd never experienced any pain like that in my life, you know? So it was crazy, you know, it was insane. I just never want to go through that again, but, yeah.
Well, you better come see us.
Yeah. So another contributing factor to inflammation, as we talked about, is stress. Truly believe stress is the root cause of everything in the body. Just depends on how it manifests in your system, right? So these are all recognizing the signs of stress. These are probably all things that we experience at one point in time or another. Stomach problems. Did you have any stress preceding
Yeah, a
that
little
onset?
bit. Yeah, a little bit, you know, like I don't have too much stress anymore, but yeah, I had some stress before that, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I was like drinking a lot too and stuff, and you know,
That'll do it.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
alright.
yeah.
Yeah, the alcohol contributes very much to like a leaky gut kind of thing.
Okay, so I drink like once a week now, my friends are like, yo, you're all man, I'm like, yeah. So, you know,
Yeah.
Now you can tell the
not
doctor
like
told me
drunk
that
every
I
night,
shouldn't
just
drink.
like drink like 2 beers and watching TV with my buddies or whatever, but yeah, I don't even do that no more, like, you just stay in the house all the time, like, hey, it is what it is, you know?
Yeah.
That's right.
You know?
That's right. Yeah, you don't want to go
Yeah.
through that.
Yeah, but I lost weight, you know what I mean? I lost weight, my skin's clear, I work out a little bit, you know, nothing
Yeah.
crazy, I feel like real good, you know? But, yeah, so,
Yeah.
so I
Well,
guess.
congratulations for
Yeah.
making those
Yeah.
lifestyle
Yeah.
changes. Good
Yeah,
for
well,
you.
I'm uncool now, but.
Yeah.
But
It's
being
worth
cool
it,
is
it's worth
uncool,
it,
you know? But go ahead, I apologize.
That's okay.
No,
So-
we love hearing it.
Effects of stress on the body produces a whole host of issues, but predominantly all being driven by inflammation. So literally can affect every organ in your body. Sleep deprivation, again, one of my favorites. So these are the effects of sleep deprivation. A big one being impaired immunity, so impaired immune system, predominantly because of the inflammation that's resulting from not sleeping. Sleep is the only time that your body is truly parasympathetic. So you have your autonomic nervous system has kind of two sides to it. One is the sympathetic, which is fight or flight. So if I'm out, you know, back in the prehistoric days, walking around and a saber-toothed tiger jumps out, that's the system that you want to kick in so that you can fight it or run away from it as fast as you can. But that's a heightened state of stress. So your body's always in that heightened state of stress. The converse of that is parasympathetic. So that's rest, digest, relax, recover. And when you're sleeping, that's the only time you're truly that way, right? Because your mind's not going, you're not responding to emails, you don't have one of these things on your phone all the time. So it's when your body kind of recovers and recycles. So when you're not doing that, you think about all the junk that's building up, all of the stress that's accumulating in the system, and you're not able to kind of repair and recover from that. Toxic exposure. So unfortunately, we're all exposed to toxins in our air, the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we're drinking. Anyone here of Trenton water? I don't know about you, but you get these notices every now and again about the issues with the Trenton water system and what you may have been exposed to, but it's never really an issue unless you're pregnant or an infant or elderly or immune compromised, right? So just kind of a scary thing. And something you need to be conscious and aware of. As women especially, we're exposed to toxins through things like lotions and makeups and a whole bunch of things that, you know, we kind of inadvertently don't even think about put on our skin, absorbs into our skin and into our bloodstream in about 30 seconds. Or we're a country that doesn't regulate any of this stuff, so if you go over to Europe, they don't allow something like 1,400 different chemicals in the production of cosmetic products. Here, I think we disallow 4. So there's really like no regulation around it. So just being conscious of that, conscious about what you have in your home, what you're cleaning your home with, cleaning products, and predominantly what you're exposing yourself and your family to. Very important. Because these are the dangers of when you're exposed to toxins long term. So we see a lot of people who come in with a lot of these things and they're like, why is this happening? Well, typically an inflammatory condition, but what does it go back to? So detoxification is a huge piece of that. Our bodies are built with a detoxification system. Problem is just that evolution hasn't caught up to the environment in which we live, so we need a little help along the way. So there are things that you can do to support your body's detoxification process, incorporating certain nutrients and supplements and plants and things like that into your diet, and a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about in terms of the food choices that we make to combat inflammation. Viruses, bacteria, things that can live in our system that are either active or perhaps even latent. So, you know, if you had or have had things like Epstein-Barr, herpes, things like that, when you're not experiencing symptoms, you may think that they're not causing any issue in your body, but they can actually be kind of latent and cause some underlying chronic inflammation that may be expressing in certain ways: pain, inflammation, dysfunction, disease. And food, so food choices. So this is just a quote: the food you eat can be either the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. So, you know, let food be thy medicine was Hippocrates back at the beginning of medicine, right? So it was back in the days before pharmaceutical drugs when we actually leveraged food as fuel and food as medicine to heal our bodies. But what do we eat now? We eat the standard American diet, the SAD diet. Kills me when I see especially kids eating this type of stuff. The big gulp sodas, you know, the fast food, eating out of the drive-through window. When I work with my clients, the first thing we do is we remove the crap. So what does crap stand for? It's chemicalized, refined, artificial, and processed food. So that's the first thing you can do.
They had a TV show where this dude, this British dude went to schools in West Virginia, like the kids were eating this for breakfast.
Yeah.
And like he was trying to get them to eat healthy, and the parents were like the pop died at 30 years old of a heart attack. The kids are overweight, and they're like, no, we don't want you to eat. We don't want you to eat good food to eat for. I'm like sitting there like, really? You know, eating cheeseburgers and fries for breakfast, and like pizza for lunch. You know, and the snack in between. I'm like, you know, the pop died at 30 years old of a heart attack. You know, I'm like 40 something. I couldn't imagine dying at 30. You know, overweight, obese. You know. Oh my God, you know, and it was just these people were so against them. It was just crazy. Like, you know, they wanted the guy. I thought they were gonna hang him, burn him, burn him like a snake. You know, they run him out of town. You know, you know, it was. I think it was like the worst school in the country for obesity for kids. All the kids are overweight. You know what I mean? Yeah, when I grew up, kids skateboarded and went outside. You know, they all on the phones and stuff. When I played basketball, I ran the streets. You know.
Yeah.
It's a different time, but
It's an epidemic.
And
It's really sad.
It's really sad that it's the lower socioeconomic areas that unfortunately don't have the resources, the knowledge. Nobody's ever taught them, and this is what's available to them. And
when I was a kid coming up and I'm sitting in the house, I'm like, there's nothing to do. And my old man be like, yo, I'll find something for you, okay? Yo, I'm out the door, you know what I mean? I'm out the door on the streets, Right? I'm gonna sit there and cut the grass, you know, do this, do that. Okay, I'll go find something to do, you know. But yeah, you know, I don't know, I don't see no kids out no more or anything like that.
Yeah.
There's the term food deserts for areas that don't have access to fresh fruit and vegetables and you know, sufficient quantities. So. And Trenton is one of those areas, unfortunately.
yeah.
Yeah, Detroit they said too.
Detroit,
Yeah, those.
Right, sure. Any of the inner cities.
Yeah, so we eat a lot of crap. Our society does, our kids do, unfortunately. And even when we do think we're eating healthy, right? Like you can eat organic, you can eat, just the quality of food nowadays isn't what it used to be because our farming practices are different. You know, our animals are being injected with things. Like you just really need to be a conscious consumer and you need to know the source of where your food is coming from. So let's talk a little bit about what we do want to be eating. I'm going to consult my notes here because there are some specific things that I want to make sure we don't miss. So in terms of what's on the anti-inflammatory food list, so there actually is an anti-inflammatory diet. It's going to sound probably a lot like the Mediterranean diet if you've heard of that because it really is modeled after that. So it's things like tomatoes and olive oil and a lot of green leafy vegetables, so incorporating things like spinach and kale and collard greens and a lot of the kind of cruciferous vegetables into your diet. Things like nuts and almonds, walnuts, Good fatty fish, so again, focusing on kind of high quality fats. So I call them the smash fishes. So it's salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. So getting good quality omega-3s in. We'll talk a little bit about omega-3s. And then coffee. So anyone here drink coffee? Yay! So coffee actually contains polyphenols. It's a powerful, potent antioxidant. And I feel like coffee is one of those things that like vacillates back and forth. Like, is it good for you? Isn't it good for you? I'm all for coffee, especially if it's loaded with Rishi Mushrooms. So that's a great thing. And then red wine. Red wine. So wine is obviously made from grapes, and grapes are, again, a powerful, potent antioxidant. So you don't have to feel bad for consuming a glass, maybe 2 glasses. Maybe not every night, but in moderation for sure, because it does support anti-inflammatory properties. So we're going to talk about some kind of technical details around some of the nutrients, and I don't want to get like too in the weeds, but just a couple that I would recommend for sure everyone be either conscious of consuming or getting into their lives in some way, shape, or form, whether that's through foods or through supplementation. So the first is vitamin D. So who knows where we get vitamin D?
Sunshine.
Yeah, so milk's one of the only food-based components, but majority of vitamin D comes from the sun. So on days like today, that's not happening.
It was sunny.
For a minute. But who was outside?
I stuck my head out.
80 degrees this morning. So unfortunately, vitamin D deficiency is an epidemic. Especially in the Northeast. Northern hemisphere is probably more accurate. So vitamin D supplementation is something that I would recommend a lot of the time. It helps to support anti-inflammatory activity in the body. It helps to regulate your metabolism. There are it's actually a hormone, so it's not just a nutrient, but once your body actually takes on the rays of the sun, it converts the vitamin D into a hormone in your body, and hormones control everything. So that is a really important nutrient. Vitamin K is another one, and the combination of those two is important because vitamin K helps with the uptake or the absorption of vitamin D. And vitamin K is the vitamin that's predominantly found in the green, thank you, green leafy cruciferous vegetables, some types of oil, some fruits, and as I mentioned, oftentimes paired with vitamin D. So those two things together kind of pack a 1-2 punch. So when you're looking for good supplements, that's one of the recommendations I'd have, is making sure that you're getting a vitamin D that has K2.
Okay.
Okay.
K2. And those are both fat soluble, right? So
Correct.
Okay.
You want to eat, yeah. So omega-3s we kind of talked about, right? Getting good high quality fish or fish supplements. A lot of, fish oil is a big thing people are taking. Do recommend supplementation with a good high quality fish oil. Now this is a really important one because a lot of the fish from which fish oil can be derived can be pretty toxic in nature, so you want to make sure that you're doing more good in terms of calming inflammation than you are adding more toxins into your system. So again, we talked at the beginning about how supplements are not regulated, so there's no governing body that regulates supplements like pharmaceutical drugs. So again, it's buyer beware. There are products out on the shelves, and especially fish oil, because it's an oil, it can go rancid. So there's no time frame associated with like how long it takes. I call it catch to capture. So a lot of fish oils you'll find on the shelf, they've been sitting there for maybe 3 years. Not a good situation. So when you're looking for a fish oil, make sure you're looking for small fish because they tend to accumulate less toxin. You want them to be caught off of, in clean waters, and you want to know a little bit about the catch to capsule time frame. So kind of hard to find, but if you work with a good quality line, usually they'll share that information. So the one that we like, that we work with in our office, we've vetted a whole bunch of lines, is one from Orthomolecular, and their catch to capture is 3 months. So not 3 years, but 3 months. Fruits and veggies. Oh, I skipped turmeric, sorry. So we were talking about turmeric or curcumin earlier. So what's all the hype about turmeric? Well, it's a pretty cool thing. It's a spice. It's derived from the root of a plant, so the turmeric portion is actually the root of the plant, and then the curcumin aspect is the active form of the turmeric, so it's like the enzyme within the plant that actually causes an anti-inflammatory response. Curcumin has been studied pretty extensively in human trials, and it's actually shown to be significantly more beneficial in calming inflammation than a lot of the NSAID drugs that are out there that people are pounding and thinking nothing of it. But if you've seen any recent news around NSAIDs, they've been linked to heart disease and stroke, and so probably not something you want to be taking on a daily basis. So this is a good alternative for that.
And so it's also leaky gut.
That too, yep. So fruits and veggies are a big component of the anti-inflammatory diet, and probably the hardest part for people. So when we talk to people about kind of modifying their diet, I think a lot of times people think of diet in terms of restriction, like what can I eat? Well, that's a component of it in some cases, but more often than not, it's about what you should be eating. So I call this process crowding out. So if I tell you that you should be filling your, 3/4 of your plate with colorful vegetables and fruits, then you don't have room for the other crap, right? So the recommendations around fruits and veggies are 3 to 4 servings of fruit a day, unless you have challenges around blood glucose regulation, you're diabetic or something, in which case we may cut that back to 2 to 3 servings. You also can focus on low glycemic fruits. So if you're concerned about blood sugar regulation, or even if you're not and you want to kind of stay steady state and avoid any possibility of that kind of peak and trough that can cause stress, then you want to eat things like berries. Those are low glycemic. You probably want to avoid things like ripe bananas. Green apples are another good option. For vegetables, you want to do raw or cooked, and you want to do 4 to 5 servings a day at a minimum. But a lot of those veggies, the ones that grow above ground, you can probably incorporate in unlimited quantities. So you need to make a difference. I usually differentiate above ground from below ground, so things that grow below ground tend to be the starchy veggies, turnips, rutabagas, potatoes, things like that, that technically fall into the veggie category, but aren't really veggies. Beans, pastas, and whole grains are highlighted on the anti-inflammatory diet. So beans and legumes, you should be consuming 1 to 2 servings per day. So a great replacement for meat in many cases are to kind of up your beans and legumes and focus on meatless dishes, at least maybe for 1 or 2 of the meals that you're eating per day. And then we talk about pasta, but I don't promote wheat-based pasta, so try to stick with gluten-free pasta, and the reason behind that is because gluten is a protein of wheat, and wheat contains a lot of glyphosate in many cases, so it's sprayed with pesticides as it's being grown and harvested. And pesticides obviously are not things that we want to be putting into our body, and oftentimes it can cause an immune response. So a lot of people have challenges around eating gluten, around eating wheat products. So there are a lot of good options that don't require you to eat gluten. So there's a Trader Joe's organic quinoa brown rice pasta, which I love. There's a lot of bean-based pastas nowadays.
Lentil pasta.
There's
Yeah,
red lentil pasta. Yeah, there's black bean pasta. There's mung bean pasta. So there are a ton of other options, and so you should probably be trying to incorporate some type of whole grain or pasta into your week, like 2 to 3 times a week. In terms of whole and cracked grains, so again, organic, if at all possible. Things like brown rice, basmati rice, buckwheat, barley, quinoa, steel-cut oats, you should be doing about 3 servings a day. So again, all of these things promoting kind of tampering of that inflammation and reversing any of the chronic inflammation that's accumulated in your system. Fat, fish, and soy. So we talked about fats, the omega-3s being the good fats. Our bodies need both omega-3s and omega-6s, so these are called essential fatty acids. We get way too many omega-6s and not enough omega-3s typically in kind of the standard American diet. So you want to focus on boosting those omega-3s because what we look at in terms of health is that ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s. So again, focusing on the smash fishes and seafood. Soy is a controversial one, especially for women. So, you know, it's been talked about soy producing estrogenic effects in women and potentially causing cancer. So if you do soy, you want to make sure that you're doing organic fermented soy-based products, non-GMO, and you can incorporate those into your diet in the form of tofu, tempeh, kind of alternative meat products in many cases.
What is it with sprouted tofu? Is that
Yeah, I mean, any type of sprouted plant or grain that you can get is a better option because it tends to be more digestible for your body. Because that process it's already gone through the process of I don't know, evolving
breaking
or
down the cell
breaking
wall
down,
and
breaking
that
down
kind
the
of thing.
components that your system would otherwise have to digest. Yeah, there's something called lectins. Have you heard of a lectin? Lectins. So it's breaking down the lectins as well.
got it?
Yeah. Spices, selenium, coffee, and tea. So we talked about turmeric being good spice. Other good spices are ginger, garlic, chili peppers, basil, cinnamon, rosemary, and thyme. In terms of detoxification, because that's an important component here as well, you can do things like spirulina or chlorella. Basil is a good one. Cilantro is a good plant that helps in that process. Selenium-rich foods, so things like Brazil nuts, shellfish like oysters, cod and shrimp, lean beef, turkey, wheat germ, and whole grains are all good options for selenium. Coffee and tea, again, not bad. The caffeine isn't a bad thing necessarily for you. So white, green, and oolong teas are good, but also make sure that you're hydrating. So super hydration is really important. You should be drinking about half your body weight in ounces of water every day, because that just helps to flush the system and to drive out the things that could be causing that inflammatory response. We talked about red wine, so obviously in moderation. And then supplementation. So what would you want to incorporate into a supplement routine or protocol? We talked about vitamin D, we talked about fish oil or omega-3s. Probably also want a good high quality multivitamin. I recommend that to everybody because again, it's just very, very hard to get the adequate nutrition for optimal health in the foods that we eat nowadays. So foods to avoid. So we talked a little bit about gluten. You see a lot of dairy products up here. Why? What's funny?
Cheese. We love cheese
I
around
know,
here.
everyone loves cheese. I've had people come in and be like cheese addicts. Like literally we had to like cold turkey off cheese. Yeah, it's rough. It's
Yeah.
rough. So, you know, the usual suspects, I think for most people who are educated on this, we talked about omega-6s, so making sure we're taking in more omega-3s to balance out the omega-6s. The omega-6s are incorporated into things like trans fats and saturated fats, so when you're going through the drive-thru and picking up the french fries loaded with omega-6s, so we're just consuming way too much of that stuff. Lactose products, so dairy products for a lot of people tend to be highly inflammatory. I talked about my son at the beginning in my introduction. We just went through a process last year where we had to take him to CHOP because he had enlarged adenoids, and we were going to do a sleep study because he was snoring like he was a, I don't know, 65-year-old, 300-pound man, and he was 4. So we didn't know what was going on. We took him down to CHOP, and they were like, oh, you know, do a sleep study, might have sleep apnea, may have to consider surgery. Took him off dairy, and it went away, amazingly. And we were even doing organic dairy products, so some people just aren't meant to have dairy. Meat is a tough one. I advocate, yes.
Question. So yogurt, there's, you know, all the different good bacteria in yogurt,
Yeah.
but yet that's been the one where I know I wanted to limit some of the dairy, but it's like, but yogurt is really good for you.
Yeah.
And that substitutes like the bowl of ice cream. It's substituted by some Greek yogurt with yummy stuff on it. So what is it? I guess, is that any different inflammatory wise, or that?
Again, it depends.
Plain?
It's going to depend on the person,
Milk.
right? So back to bioindividuality. So I think the only way to really know that, and what we advocate for our patients, is to cut something out for 21 days and then reintroduce it. So if you take the yogurt out for 21 days and then you eat it again and you notice that you feel good and it's fine and like you don't notice anything kind of going on in your body, fine. then you might be okay with it. But if you do, you know, you don't notice until you take it out
Yeah.
when you put it back in, because it's just something you're living with every day. You don't recognize it.
What about like moderation? So I mean, like the Super Bowl's coming up.
Yeah.
And there's like wings,
Yeah.
pizza, and
You gotta live
cheesesteaks,
too.
you know what I mean?
You gotta live. Yeah. I advocate
I'm
about
gonna be eating some of that stuff.
Yeah,
I
me
mean,
too.
Yeah, I don't eat
Yeah.
it every day, but you know, I mean.
Yeah. 80-20, 90-10. You know, you
I
gotta.
don't eat like that every day, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, you know, buffalo wings in my face and dipping cheese,
Yeah.
blue cheese, you know.
Where are you gonna be?
Are you cooking?
I'm not ordering. Yeah, oh, well, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to like, I don't think any of us in this room are like the saints of, you know, like we never do it.
Because I work for these guys, and they were big fat dudes. They were. They eat cheesesteak and pizza, but God forbid if you touch their diet, snap them. I'm serious. I'm serious. It's like they said I'm on a diet. You know, sit there and watch them go for down
Yeah.
cheesesteak and eat pizza and then drink a diet snap and think they're okay.
Yeah.
You know, it's just, I'm not the smartest man in the world, but I'm like, all right, all right.
You might be a little
You don't look like
you might
you're
detect
losing
a slight
Yeah.
inconsistency.
Yeah, I don't know. But the diet snap, you know.
It counteracts the
Yeah.
cheesesteak.
I guess, I don't know. They knew something I didn't, but.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the things on the list here is artificial sweeteners.
Okay.
So obviously sweets, you know, baked goods, things super loaded with sugar and not good for you. I think everyone knows that.
Can I just comment on the yogurt for
Yeah.
1 second? So the probiotic will digest the lactose in there and give you some good bacteria, you know, maybe not at the levels that you need. But if people have problems with the milk protein, it's not going to take care of that. So that's why the elimination reintroduction, because it's sometimes the proteins that people are having trouble with, and
Makes
not the
sense.
lactose
Not that,
part of it.
yes.
So.
Thank you.
So artificial sweeteners are really just as bad because they produce the same reaction in your body. Basically, they trick your body to thinking that you're consuming something sweet when you're not. So anyone who tells you about, you know, drinking diet stuff, it's not helping. They're not helping their purpose. They're also loading themselves with potentially cancer-causing ingredients. So I don't know if you've ever like read the side of a Diet Snapple bottle, but it has has some ingredients that have little asterisks, and if you read at the bottom, it'll say like, has been shown to cause cancer in lab rats or something. So just, again, important to pay attention. All right, so probably sounds a lot like the Mediterranean diet, as I said, probably because it is. There's a lot in common. What does the Mediterranean diet really emphasize? Everything that we've talked about, but predominantly plant-based. So, you know, loading up on, again, the spectrum of phytonutrients. So we encourage people to eat the rainbow, eating all the different colors, because they all bring a different nutritional profile to your body. Using good high quality oils, so fats are essential. It's kind of interesting because when you think about like essential nutrients, one of the ones we hear often about is essential fatty acids. So again, going back to like the days of low fat, we weren't doing ourselves any benefit. And interestingly, like majority of your brain is fat, and it needs fat in order to function. So really important to get the good high quality fats. Using herbs and spices instead of chemicals and other things to kind of flavor food. So getting creative in terms of good, fresh, high quality herbs and spices is beneficial. You want to limit your consumption of red meat, at least with the Mediterranean diet. A couple of times a month are fine. And when you're doing that, you want good, high quality meats. So you want grass-fed, organic. Again, source is just as important as what you're eating. You want to make sure it's coming from a reputable source. Focusing more so on fish. You can do poultry as well. But really a big characteristic of eating too is enjoying it. So to your point, like, I don't know, you could probably sit around with your friends and eat salmon and a salad and maybe have as much fun as eating the buffalo wings and drinking beer. I don't know.
We'll have the wine and that'll
And
change.
have the wine, right? So, but the enjoyment component is huge
Yeah.
too. So there are places called blue zones. Have you guys heard of blue
No.
zones? So blue zones are areas in the world where people typically live to over 100 years. And they're all over the place, so there's no similarities in terms of climate or culture necessarily, or diet, right? Like, so there's one in Sardinia, Italy, and then there's one in Southern California, and there's one in Indonesia.
Can I make an interesting comment?
Yes.
So I just saw this video about Sardinia, that they eat this cheese to die for. Have you heard of this?
She really needs the cheese.
No, I mean, no, it's
No.
You've never heard
I don't
in
think
Sardinia, so.
Not the cheese.
It's like infested with maggots, basically, and then
Oh.
they eat the extra of maggots. Yeah. Apparently it's like this delicacy.
Oh.
So fun fact, so they're living that long and eating this cheese?
Yeah, could be related.
Ugh.
Could be.
Maybe it's in spite of.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll have to research
It's all
that,
the
but
other
it's
parts
interesting.
of their diet,
Yeah.
it's not just that one
Yeah, that's just for
thing.
special
Maggot
occasions.
cheese.
Yeah, I was gonna say, hopefully that's just on special occasions, you don't have to do that every day, but,
Also, you mentioned the smash fish for being good with omega-3s. What other fish are good to
Are
consume?
good.
Mhm.
I'll tell you what's not, what you would want to shy away from are the large steak fishes,
Okay.
like the tunas and the swordfishes, because they are larger fish. They tend to be more riddled with toxins because of kind of the nature of how they've evolved and what they've eaten. But like whitefish, flaky fish is fine. Tilapia I've heard is kind of dirty, but like a cod or flounder, those tend to be okay. They don't offer the same omega-3 rich benefits, but healthy just the same protein-wise.
Mhm.
So the point of talking about the blue zones was that community is really important. So it's eating with friends, it's eating with family, it's enjoying your food, it's showing gratitude for your meal. So it's the whole experience around food, not just what we're doing, which oftentimes I'm guilty, right? Shoving it in the mouth in between patients or in the car, right? Taking the kids to school, like just trying to get it in. So a couple of things we can do to test for inflammation if you're not sure. I mean, a lot of times it presents itself because you're symptomatic. You have joint pain, or you have headaches, or you have an autoimmune condition, you rash on your skin, whatever that might be. Cardiac disease. But these are 5 blood tests that we tend to run. So fasting insulin, so that tells us how your body is regulating the blood glucose. Hemoglobin A1C, which is a longer term look at blood glucose regulation. So it's kind of a rolling estimate over a period of several months to determine what your body's doing. C-reactive protein, which is an inflammatory marker within your system. Serum ferritin, and then red blood cell width, so RBW. So those are part of a CBC profile. Is ferritin part of a CBC?
no, you have to order that separately, it's part of the iron status.
Right. Anyone know what this is?
Mushroom.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite things. These are Rishi mushrooms. So Rishi mushrooms have been used for thousands of years in kind of traditional Ayurvedic medicine. They were actually once the food or supplement of royalty in Asia. And I had heard rumors that you would have a limb cut off if you were caught stealing the mushrooms from the kingdom. But they are amazing in terms of anti-inflammatory properties. So a lot of mushrooms have medicinal benefits. Reishi is one of them. Reishi has a component of it called Ganoderma lucidum, which is kind of the active component in the mushroom that tends to lend itself towards anti-inflammatory properties. They've been studied against cancer. They've been shown to impair growth of tumors and even shrink them in many cases. They help significantly during conventional cancer treatment to eliminate some of the side effects associated with that process. They balance pH. They are antioxidant. So mushrooms are good, and reishi mushrooms especially. So if you can find a supplement that is comprised of a reishi mushroom, that's a good thing to do. And we have some samples here. We have coffee and tea infused with reishi mushrooms or Ganoderma lucidum. And hemp and cannabis. So this is something that we employ in our practice. We leverage CBD, cannabidiol oils, and we also are a participant of the medical marijuana program for both New Jersey and Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania too.
Yes.
We have a patient that lives in Pennsylvania and she couldn't get it even though they had helped her because it wasn't, like she couldn't go across the river basically, so now.
Yeah?
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, we're
Now we know
both sort
where
of
to
on
go.
both sides of the river.
Yeah, yeah, it's just crazy.
So in your body, you have something called an endocannabinoid system, which is responsible for inflammation and pain. And so basically what CBD and marijuana do is they help to bind to the receptors for those things and tamper down inflammation and also alleviate a lot of times the pain associated with that, and also promote a healing process. So big proponents of plant-based medicine, not only in the food that you're chewing and swallowing, but also in many other ways. A couple other ways we test for inflammation. We run a stool test called the GI map, which shows us if you are harboring parasites, if you are the host for any pathogenic parasites in your system. So we look at, and this is a real test, this is real. So this person was a patient. We tested them. They had several bacterial pathogens, some parasitic pathogens, viral pathogens, protozoan pathogens, viruses, which were active Epstein-Barr specifically, and actually had worms. So this is a stool test, and it's a DNA PCR test, so we're looking, it's a very specific test. It's not like what they would run in a conventional medical world where they look at your sample under a microscope. They're looking for presence of DNA of these pathogens. It also shows us an inflammatory profile of what's going on with your gut. So as we said, in functional medicine, all disease and dysfunction tends to tie back to the gut. Talked about leaky gut and what goes on there. So taking a look inside the gut is a really good way to gain insight into what's going on in the body. We also run a test called the Dutch test, which looks at your hormones. So we talked about that cortisol, right? Cortisol being your key stress hormone. So if you have chronic stress, taking a look at what your cortisol patterns are doing is really helpful in discerning how we might be able to tweak those things, whether that's through lifestyle or nutrition or supplementation. In some cases, it would be through bioidentical hormones. We also look at sex hormones. So all of your sex hormones are downstream from a lot of the stuff that's kind of regulating your stress process. So a lot of people, like men especially, if they're testosterone deficient, we have to look upstream to say what's going on with your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal and see how we can address that stress. So this is our team. Some of us are here this evening. What it's like to work with a functional medicine team. So we talked a little bit about what functional medicine was, but really our approach is that we look at the whole person. We spend 60 to 90 minutes with our patients, so it's not just a quick kind of revolving door of many medical offices nowadays. I think the standard visit in a medical office is like 8 to 15 minutes. Again, 60 to 90. We look at the whole person. We look at things as being interconnected and interrelated, and we're looking for the underlying root cause as opposed to just treating the symptoms. We focus on the 4 R's, which is education, engagement, empowerment, and then encouragement. We offer health and wellness-based programs which focus on nutrition and lifestyle changes and behaviors, focusing on things like stress management and sleep hygiene and good quality foods and just kind of all of the things that contribute to health and well-being. Because health insurance is expensive, but health assurance is priceless. So we are offering a special offer. Typically our initial consultation fee is $299. We're offering that for $249 to anyone who's here this evening, as well as anyone who may take a look at the video or other clients, patients of Fluid Physio. That's it. Next steps, we do offer free 15-minute consultations, so you can come in and check out the practice and talk with Jackie. She's our patient ambassador. She's awesome. And just get a feel for what it is we do and how we do things differently. So, that's it. Any questions?
Thank you. I think you answered some of the questions that I had, and I think there's definitely information that some of the people that said they were going to watch the video that they're going to get great out of it. You definitely hit some of the points that I know some people are struggling with.
Good.
Very informative.
Good.
Thank
you.
you.
And anyone can call us at any time, email, whatever. As I said, our website's princetonIH.com. My email is jenna@princetonIH.com, JENNA. So feel free to share that and share our cards.
Maybe you guys can talk to that patient we were talking about with the specific
Yes,
question?
yeah,
Okay.
and I actually have to
Yeah.
research that. So I know that kombucha tends to have way less caffeine than like a cup of tea, but I don't know that you can actually make kombucha off of tea that doesn't have caffeine in it.
Okay.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll have to look into it. And the one thing we didn't really talk about, which I'm a huge advocate for, again, is kind of going back to sleep, so what I call sleep hygiene. So really focusing on creating an environment where your body wants to sleep. So turning off this and the television well in advance of trying to lie down and go to sleep, because the blue light screws up your circadian rhythms. Leveraging natural ambient light before going to bed, not going to bed too hungry.
There's some phones that have that light feature that, you know, so I set it so that like around
Light
8
shift.
o'clock it'll change, and then it's like, oh, already? I guess it's getting time to
Lying
shut down. And
Yeah,
yeah, that's a neat feature.
yeah,
What
you
about
want,
the volume now? Like, I used to leave my TV on all night, and like, things would be on TV, and they started
Oh.
like getting into my dreams.
I said no TV in the bedroom.
Yeah, you know?
Me too.
Like, yeah,
No
you
TV
know?
in the bedroom.
Or I had the TV on.
Because
so-
I'll just keep it on all night.
Yeah, and my brain knows what time
Yeah.
like some TV shows are on. So by hearing it, like even though my eyes are asleep, my eyes are closed, my brain is still thinking like, oh, it's 2 o'clock in the morning now because this TV show is on. You know,
yeah,
Yeah.
so I put on a timer now, like 90 minutes, and it shuts off. You know, but yeah, just sleep with TV all night long. I sleep that good.
yeah,
To roll over like. Sleep 2 hours and roll over, and then start watching a TV show and
yeah.
go back to sleep to roll over again at 3 in the morning, start watching the TV show and fall back asleep, you know? Yeah,
Then you never even really know what happens on the show, so.
yeah, I didn't know who did it.
Exactly.
You know, I'm
Yeah.
like, I gotta assume the butler did it, you know?
Do you have any particular ideas of whether it's nutrition-wise or specific immune deficiency? I don't know if specific diagnosis might be it, but you know, talking about neuropathies or symptoms of that nerve tingly that might be related to any of the nutritional leaky gut component, is that possible?
B12 deficiency.
Yeah, B12, some of the other B vitamins, so usually people with neuropathy, they usually get a trial of that anyway, so it could be that. You know, a lot of it obviously is related to glucose regulation and that kind of thing.
Right.
So certainly people with glycotoxicity, but yeah, sometimes it's just idiopathic and you can't quite put your finger on it, so you start just really attacking inflammation that could be going on. With some of the things we talked about, the curcumin, but CBD or cannabis are sometimes very good. Low dose naltrexone is also very good, modulating the immune and inflammatory systems. You know, but we'll also go after. You know, we'll be looking at a lot of other things too, like the gut and that kind of thing, looking for other underlying causes of inflammation.
Turn the light, because definitely here, and I wanted to. There you go. So I've had a couple of patients that sort of like, they're good, their injuries sort of managed, and then a couple of the people that I'm thinking of, late 40s, mid 40s, it's sort of that time where it's like, yeah, but you know, I'm still waking up with like the achiness and little things that are still sort of there. And I sort of brought up the fact, I was like, well, you might want to start looking at what other things are causing that, you know, what is it nutrition wise or something like that you might want to get into, because yes, you know, things happen and get a little older, and some of that, just do a little movement in the morning. However, is there something else? Because still the 40s, I feel, is still a little young to be waking up a
In pain.
little stiff and like,
Right. The 40s though is when the chickens start coming home to roost.
Yeah.
You know, that stuff that you know, we've been doing in, you know, our teenage years and 20s and 30s. All of a sudden, that's about the time that those chronic degenerative diseases are beginning. And you're right, they have to start looking at other things.
yeah.
They have to look at their whole lifestyle. They have to look at
Yeah.
what they're eating. They have to look at how they're sleeping. The whole functional medicine tree,
Right.
you know, all those underlying causes, that's when you have to start looking. It's the mid-40s. We do a brain health program for people who have, you know, either have, you know, early cognitive decline or just, you know, have a risk factor. They had somebody in their family had Alzheimer's, dementia or something. It's recommended that you start looking at that mid-40s, 45. You know, we start recommending people that they should do a cognoscopy, which is some cognitive testing, but also testing of, you know, all the inflammatory and glucose regulation pathways and all those things that could contribute to cognitive decline in their 50s or 60s or 70s. About mid-40s is when you really want to start looking at that and addressing that.
So someone that might not necessarily be having any major symptoms,
Right.
that, you know, again, I'm thinking of this specific person that no major symptoms, but yeah, it's a little, what are some of the specifics, like, oh, I'm gonna go to see everyone at Princeton Integrative. What would you guys start with? I know your history is amazing and it's super long and very complete to gather information, but what are the tests that you talked about? Which ones would you recommend in this case?
So the testing would include, you know, I usually start with conventional testing. So I'm testing thyroid, I'm testing blood sugar, and, you know, the tests that Jenna had up there in terms of, you know, the A1C and the insulin levels, you know, things that really aren't looked at a lot in conventional medicine, unless somebody has a diagnosis of diabetes already. And then even then, sometimes they're not really looked at. But, you know, a lot of the glucose regulation, a lot of the inflammatory markers. We'll do that, but we'll also be looking at the gut, you know, looking for signs of leaky gut or pathogens, organic acid testing that tells us about, part of it looks at the microbiome and how their gut is doing, but the other part looks at the mitochondria, the energy producing part of the cell, to see how efficiently that is working. Because if that's not working well, then your nerves aren't working well, your brain might not be working well, people complain of brain fog and that kind of thing. And the hormones are huge, you know, we see a big shift certainly in women, but certainly sometimes men have what is called andropause, you know, similar to menopause, certainly not as dramatic usually, but you know, you can have, that's when men might start be complaining of some of the similar symptoms, so brain fog and that kind of thing. We've had people who, you know, we've worked on their blood sugar, had helped them lose some weight, worked on their blood sugar, and then this guy in his mid-40s says, you know, all of a sudden I can think a lot more clearly than I did before. So those are kind of the things that's where we start, and then we see where that takes us.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Good.
Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you.